In a socially distanced world, Design United is an optimistic digital platform for collaborative design and connection. Design United was created in March 2020 during a period of intense lockdown and quarantine measures within the region. The aim behind Design United was to create an optimistic space for regional dialogue, connections, collaborations, and opportunities for young regional designers and design practices. A much needed network of support and peer mentorship during these uncertain times. Talented young designers and design studios working on design innovation with an approach that is relevant to our South Asian region have been invited to be a part of the platform. We also encourage design students from the region to share their work, be involved in the dialogue, and to be an active part of Design United. Design United, most of all, believes in creating a community of designers and design knowledge that is largely contextual, with focus on contributing to the environment and our community. Design United believes greatly in a spirit of collaboration and idea exchange. Welcome once again to Design United's 41st Design Conversation, a conversation with two talented design firms from the subcontinent, Malisha Koditavaku from Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Solachi Ramanathan and Ajay Dev from Urban Workshop, Chennai, India. I'm Varna Shashidhar, founder principal of a regional landscape practice, VSLA, based in Bengaluru. I'm supported by my wonderful DU and VSLA team in this endeavor, along with Claywork Spaces. Clayworks creates flexible co-work spaces that focus on productivity and sustainability. They also offer complete work-from-home solutions. Design Conversations and Design United has featured talented emerging designers from our region, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, selected for their innovative approaches and practices that bear a deep resonance with the place they are from. Design United firmly believes in interdisciplinary conversations, learning, believing that this will lead to a cross-pollination of ideas across various design disciplines and therefore richer collaborations. We've also had brilliant mentors, regional designers with great expertise and commitment to mentoring younger generation of designers. Next month, we celebrate our very first design festival, so please continue to join us. With this background to Design United, let's move to the much anticipated presentation and conversation for this day. It's indeed a delight to introduce and welcome architect Malisha from Colombo and architects Solachi and Ajay from Chennai, India. Architect Malisha Koditavaku pursued her degrees in architecture at the City School of Architecture, Colombo, and obtained a master's in architecture from the University of West of England, Bristol, in 2012. She has practiced architecture under SSJ Architect and started her own practice after 2018. Malisha's practice takes on a holistic approach to design, going beyond aesthetics to keep occupants' well-being and sustainability at the heart of everything that they do. It's focused on resource and energy-efficient design. They're building a brand of responsible architecture that's best known for their adaptive reuse of derelict buildings and discarded shipping containers. Malisha is also a member of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects since 2014 and an international chartered member of the Royal Institute of British Architects since 2020. Malisha won a merit award for the adaptive reuse of her box house project in Sri Lanka this year at the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects 2021 Design Awards. Congratulations and welcome, Malisha. Our course presenting speakers today are Solachi Ramanath and Ajay Dev from Urban Workshop, Chennai, India. Solachi completed her undergraduate studies in School of Architecture and Planning with a master's in Housing and Urbanism from the AA London. She has worked at Interspace and Matthew Ghosh Architects before starting an independent practice. Ajay is a senior architect who graduated from Adhiyamaan College of Engineering, Chennai. He has worked at Design and Development, JP, STA Associates, and Allianz Group before joining Urban Workshop. Urban Workshop is an architecture and urban design studio which is based in Chennai, India, which was established in 2015 by Solachi. Their architecture is inspired by memory of a spatial experience. They use associations to construct an image of the building at the beginning. At a moment during the design process, the building will present a unique image in itself that becomes a reference for them to develop it further. This, for them, is a continuous process. Welcome, Solachi and Ajay. We will start today's presentation with Urban Workshop from Chennai. Thank you.
So, yeah, as Bernard introduced us, we are a young practice based in Chennai, and today we're going to share with you some of our projects that we have been working on over the last 5 years. Some completed, some ongoing. So we'll take you through 4 of our projects and also share the process with you. So that's our office in Chennai. The image on the left where on the first floor, and we sort of in our design process we engage a lot with materials and the process of construction and structure, and we have a fairly collaborative style of working where we all sort of sit around the table and brainstorm for ideas, details, and different parts of the project. We have Vinodini, Vijay, our office boy Pulender, and our dog Hobbs. So the first project, as the name suggests, it was for a client in the healthcare service, as he was healthcare service provider, and they required a medical facility which was modular, and so that it could be deployed in existing institutions like schools. They also wanted it to be digitally enabled and a child-friendly environment. And the structure was to create a physical identity for the services that they were already providing. So we started by examining the current state of medical rooms and healthcare in schools, and we found that the organization of the various activities was poor, which led to in several inefficiencies, and also in some cases disturbed the patients who are being treated. So we looked at what the ideal patient flow would be, and there were 4 primary areas or zones which we needed to create. They were the registration. After the registration, sort of there's the screening and isolation, which is specific to our current environment. Then we have the diagnostics and treatment. The facility is sort of like a microcosm of a larger medical facility. So we, when they told us that they needed to be modular, we first explored using a shipping container, and the advantages of using a shipping container were that it was durable, and also it could be completely built in the factory and simply deployed on site. But when we, our fabricator, when we had conversation with them, he indicated that it would actually be more expensive to find a good shipping container and repurpose it, as opposed to, building one ourselves, which was suitable to our requirement. So we stayed with the module size because it was easy to transport, and we looked at how we can organize the multiple functions within that proportion of that space. So we created this wall, a deep wall, which would manifest in the form of niches, openings, storage. And this was along the longer edge of the container, which contained the primary functions of diagnostics and treatment, a nurse station, and the monitoring and monitoring of the patient. And we decided to use wood, plywood, because it was a friendly material that one is more familiar with. And of course, the being a metal container, being made of metal, it was the thermal comfort was going to be an issue. So we provided a secondary roof to reduce the direct solar radiation, along with insulation along the walls. And that's the plan basically consists of this wall on one side, and on the other edge of the long side, we have the waiting area and registration. So the central area is sort of free for circulation. And the other elements like the ramp and staircase had to be installed on site. So since we were not using a shipping container as it is, this opened up the possibility of rethinking the material expression, the external expression. So instead of using a trapezoidal sheet, we chose to use a flat galvanized sheet, and sort of use the structure of the secondary roof as part of the expression of the container. So the container itself would be completely fabricated on site with the interior. The ramp would be then assembled on site. So that brings us to the second project, which is a vacation home in Kunur. When we went to the site, it's a valley view, and it's you can see Metupalayam actually in one corner. We knew that when we saw the site, we had to do very little with the building itself, and so our idea, we wanted the building to be harmonious with the context. So it consisted of two blocks, and the manner in which the two blocks were joined was inspired by the shape of the contour. So the building sort of gently, turns at angles, so it facing different parts of the view. And the facade of the building is open with the windows and to the view opposite. So as a result of this, the geometry, the central space, becomes the collective or the common areas, the living, dining, the fireplace. And the bedrooms are sort of at the ends of the circulation, so on the ground floor and on the first floor. And this collective space has a very fluid, organic character. So you sort of don't really feel like you're moving from one space to the other, but there's still some separation. These are some of the photographs. So we used stone for the flooring, which was sort of had a natural finish. And the reason for this was we wanted to create a soft edge between the garden outside and the spaces inside, and really make that transition very easy on the person using the space. This was bedrooms upstairs, the corridors leading to the bedrooms. Some of the detailing, we used steel, because at the client's request, because it was going to be easier to maintain, because wood tends to sort of expand over time. And the other material, again, stone, but in a different form. This is something that you'll see when you're driving on the hills. The retaining walls are very often made of this stone, and at one point the landscape takes over. And so we wanted to create that, and now we've got the plants which are growing at the bottom and growing out of the stone walls. And slowly it's just sort of going to be part of the landscape, the larger landscape. The third project is it's a housing for senior citizens. This is the site is actually outside Pondicherry, and when the clients came to us, their residential community where senior citizens would feel happy and peaceful, and they wanted to create a serene environment. And we were very excited by this brief, and we said we had to do two things. One was the architecture had to facilitate forming of creation of communities, and there had to be a lot of garden and green space all around. So we went to, the design process was quite long. We went through 3 schemes in a sort of evolutionary manner, and we'll just sort of share a little bit about each scheme, because I think each scheme was very revealing, and the learnings were a lot. So the other requirement that they had was that it had to be 3 blocks, because they wanted to build 2 in the beginning, and arranging the blocks with a big garden in the middle. It was fairly simple. So linear blocks with a garden in the middle. And the scale of the blocks was very important, so that there was sufficient light coming into the garden for plants to grow. So it had to be low, so only about 3 floors high. Now this scheme did not, we could not take this forward for the primary reason for that was that the 2 longer blocks were facing east and west, and that would mean that it would be pretty hot, especially outside of Chennai. And because of the scale, we were also not able to achieve the required area to be built. So then we sort of modified this a little bit, and we decided to we tried to bend the blocks a little bit so that they become self-shading in a way, and we wanted to since the blocks now became larger, the passage in the middle became sort of like just a green corridor. So we want to provide more space for communal activity for people to, informally engage. So we created a large veranda in front of the apartments on every floor, where it was sort of a space where people could informally gather. And this again, was an issue, because while we thought it was important for them to have this space, the clients felt it would be difficult to sell it. Ultimately, their personal space became smaller. So then finally we said, okay, so we've tried everything with 3 blocks. Maybe we need to reconsider that. And then we decided to try, a cluster option, where we had a larger number of blocks which were clustered around smaller courtyards. And so this led us to the final scheme. where we had 5 blocks to be built in 2 phases, and they were more or less similar, and they had smaller garden spaces in between them. And the unit itself, there were 1 and 2 bedroom units, and they were all organized around this, this covered balcony space. And there was a large common continuous balcony which connected the all the rooms. And we thought that the housing did not require kitchens and it could be more open, but there again we were wrong. It seemed like that was what people desired, was with a house, an apartment with a kitchen. When we, in this scheme, we struggled quite a bit in the architectural expression, because it was sort of a medium rise building, which was neither low rise nor high rise. So we had to, what we tried was to sort of create a variation in the expression of the balconies. So we, on the upper floor, balconies, continuous balconies, which were open to sky, and then on the lower floors, wherever we created large plant. The spaces in the common, the community center. Learning from this, I come back from after my master's in housing and urbanism, and I've been exposed to many different typologies of housing, and many interesting ones. But I think the big learning from this was that very closely connected to the nature in which it is provided, who provides them, whether it's government or private, whether it's rented, it's for lease or for ownership. So with that, we'll go to the last project.
Yeah, Samudra.
Scroll up when you need to. Scroll up.
Samudra is another residential project in Chennai ECR, which is a closer proximity of coastline. So the area is about an acre of land, and there was an existing building with from client, so which should retain the existing trees and to allow more light and ventilation inside. So ensure that we just made the plan with rooms with juxtapositions, so with no much of corridors, and it's open towards garden around. So it has a multiple entry, so you can step down to garden from most of the places like living room, master bedroom, and dining, as well as from library. This is a side, actually it's a side elevation, that is a prominent side of the house. So as you see, it's a simple cube with a slope top. And another special requirement from the client is they came to have a slope roof, since they were very familiar with the slope roof in their previous homes. So we decided to use the slope roof in a different form, which will be compatible for our usage. So as you see, part of the slope roof will have double height rooms with a large internal volume. And when you move toward the ridge, so you will have a double height, double story rooms. So all the guest bedrooms are first floor will have a regular domestic activities. So brick cladding is a major material which we have used here. So the brick what we used is customized for our requirement. And here we use for cladding, and other block we have used that for load bearing structure as well. So all these lines are RCC lintel. These are very thin at the elevation, but it has a slope profile which will get thicker into walls. So since it has a top, cut the bricks and the same profile what lintel was. So these are the, I mean, our contractor was very helpful to do all these things. And this is some of the internal view from the living room. So this is how the brick cladding inside the rooms as well. So all these windows are longer, tall windows, which will be complement to the internal volume of the space. And we cut down the height by providing transom, horizontal transom, so that it will be the intimacy of human scale will be, will be easier. This is a view from dining. So since you are moving to the dining, you will see the transformation of spaces. The ambience from the veranda, you will have exposed concrete and exposed brick all around. When you enter into dining, you will get into a warm place which closed by wooden all around. So we have used wooden cladding on the wall as well as wooden ceiling. So the dining step into a brick flooring, which is going to happen. It's on progress, and looking towards the water body. This is the other block which closer to our main block, which is external kitchen, so which closer to our outdoor dining. And here you can see a modified form of usage of brick. I mean, this wall is plastered with sooty plaster. So the bricks, whatever we had excess, and we powder it and mix to certain ratio, and we tried with different ratio and found the right one to apply on the wall. So finally we made the sooty mortar and carport. And this is the main door. So when we start designing the main door, we were discussed to have a same expression of exterior walls into the door as well. So which is a thinner structure of straight line. That's how we ended with this profile. So initially we tried to have a solid wood with these grooves, but it was a little expensive, as well as we found difficult to get the solid wood for this size. So finally these are the separate wooden studs made into this profile, and they may bind with the intermediate supports. That's how we managed to do this door. And here the detailing the time what we spent on the detailing was very helpful when we are at site to execute the work. So the amount of time we are spending in the desk in detailing will really helpful for the execution, for the ease of execution.
That brings us to the end of our presentation.
Thank you so much, Solachi and Ajay, for sharing your beautiful, very interesting projects with us, the process of design as well as the process of making. Also, all the challenges that you've encountered while establishing a young practice. Thanks so much for sharing your design journey with us. With this, I would like to request Malisha to please present and share your work. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Big thanks to the team at Design United for having me on board. And it's a pleasure to present alongside Urban Workshop, who's presented some really amazing work. I would like to look at things from a slightly different perspective, and my presentation today would be a little bit more about encouraging young architects to think along the lines of what happens to the buildings we create at the end of their lifespan. Often we think of it as always a beginning. You're always building something, you're always creating something, but it's not very often that we stop to think about what happens at the end of the 25, 30 years, what happens to this building. So, and I think especially being in developing countries like India and Sri Lanka and South Asian countries, I think that's also something we do need to look at. So hopefully my presentation inspires you a little bit to think about things along those lines as well. So I think this is a very familiar image if you live kind of in a South Asian country. So what happens is when a building is demolished, it ends up being dumped in a really precious wetland or a forest or somewhere, and this is becoming a growing problem in our areas. So I think it's time that we kind of look at recyclable materials and look at things that have been recycled or reused. And it's not a new concept, but I think as a generation we belong to, we understand that there is like an urgent need to think about these things as well. So what really is responsible design? I think that as architects, I mean, we are also artists in a sense, but I think we have a lot more responsibility in the sense that it's a functional form of art, and we have a huge responsibility by the people who use our buildings, how they feel inside it, because our environments kind of affect how we feel. So it can make you happy or angry or depressed, or so there's a lot of factors at play, and I think we have to really think about all of those things when we do design. So when you go beyond aesthetics, I think as designers, there are certain things we need to ask ourselves with every step of a project. Like, would this space induce like happiness every day? Would somebody be able to kind of seamlessly go about their day, or is my building going to obstruct their routine? Is it a maintenance nightmare, or where did this material come from, and what will happen to it at the end of its lifespan? A really important question is this necessary in terms of space or materials or a lot of things? And can this be done more efficiently? And these are questions I think that we need to keep asking ourselves. And I'll just run you through two projects that I also understand that I've been fortunate enough to have clients who've been very open to suggestion and to doing something slightly crazy, whereas not everyone would be willing to take a chance with their investment. So I'll just run you through two projects as to how I kind of approached design. So the first one, this is the first time anyone's seeing this because it's still under construction and it's actually going to be completed sometime next month. And this is a 3D rendering of what it would end up looking like. But basically the client came to me with a plot of land. It was 40 perches or just over 1,000 square meters. And he had invested in it because there was a useless building on it, and he invested in it for land value. And it was going to be divided into 4. And he came to me with the option of putting up 4 semi-luxury houses for sale. So it was entirely an investment project that from his point of view, he was looking at. And I gave him a counter proposal, and I said, what if we restore this building? Because I really didn't want to bring it down. It was a 5,000 square foot building. I didn't want it ending up in a marsh somewhere. So I suggested, why don't we try and redo this and kind of market it to a higher end, like a luxury home. And that actually resulted in a higher ROI for the client, because his investment was smaller and his return was higher ultimately, or will be higher ultimately once we get to that. So it is a slightly bigger budget project. So it's about $250,000 US. I'll just run you through what we did. So this was the state of the building. I think even the guy who sold the land didn't value it at anything because it was considered worthless. And it was in quite a bad state. That was the front elevation of it, very, very ordinary. And the potential that I saw in it, if you look at the floor plan, it was very simple and open plan, and there was not a lot of walls up inside. And the lines that you see in blue, walls that we built to separate the spaces. So there was a basement, a semi-basement, which we thought was wonderful for a entertainment room and a pool table and like a very entertaining zone. And the ground level to have the living spaces, the living dining pantry, and the upper level to have the private spaces like the bedrooms. So the upper level had the most amount of divisions. A few pictures to just show you the transformation. I don't know how clear it is because they're still kind of construction photos, but on the left, you have the building as we found it. We had just taken out the door and the windows at that point. And so I played a little bit like with things like the entrance where took out the sunshade and the beam and made it double height, so to create a little bit of a different volume and things like that. And we looked at a little bit of a stone veneer, so that on a section, so that to give it a little more of an upmarket finish, so that you can appeal to a higher clientele. So that was actually just a stone veneer. It was a very thin layer of stone that was pasted on the existing wall to give it that look. This is the same view from the same location. So left, you have a panoramic view of the garden through the existing window, and on the right, you see what it looks like once we've done that transformation. So now it's a view from a bedroom, and we haven't landscaped and things yet, but kind of, it's the same place, but like the view of it has completely changed. So that's currently what it looks like. I think the left photo is when we had taken the roof off. The roof was the only element that we had to completely replace because it wasn't suitable for a home. But we did use the steel that was on the roof. We did reuse the steel that was on the roof. I think you see it here on the photo on the left. So all the steel purlins were restored and finished and reused for the garage, and we did a kind of an outdoor parking space, and that was reused for that. So the roof was done afresh, but that's kind of, it looks much more like a home than the picture on the left, which again is the same space. So that's the same view that you're looking at. You see the same jack tree in the view. So the left would be the building when we had just started working on it, and as it is currently is the view on the right. Yeah, so back to this, and this is what we're hoping the end. The windows and doors are all done, but they're due to be fitted in next week. So this would be the end look of the building, and we're hoping that it would make a great home, and that it didn't go to waste. And the next one that I would like to present to you is the box house, and that is a container conversion. It's a 5-bedroom villa. It's 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, but it's only 230 square meters. So that's about less. It's about 2,500 square feet in total. The villa itself is only 2,080 square feet, and I think the biggest thing to learn from this was that by being restricted by the containers and the volumes themselves, we actually managed to fit a lot more into a little space. So on the left, that's how the containers are configured. The space in the middle was fabricated. It's a space between the containers, and we kind of roofed it separately to give it a different volume from the rest of the space. And the structure is almost entirely repurposed steel. So it's about 90% reused and only about 10% of new materials, which was for the roof of that middle section that was used. So that's what the inside of a shipping container looks like. It's very basic, and I think Urban Workshop would also appreciate the amount of kind of detailing that you have to do, and it's kind of different to what we usually do. So it's a lot of detailing and learning on the go. Unfortunately, with our project, it was so complex. The connections were so complex that we couldn't do a lot of fabrication at the factory, and we had to do a lot of it on site. So at this stage, we moved it to the site next. So as you can see, sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. Our container broke and they dropped one of the containers while trying to place it. It's a bit of a process because we had a lot of trees on site, and I was determined not to let any of them go. Unfortunately, I had to cut one tree, but I managed to save everything else. So this was the price we had to pay. We had to maneuver between trees and ended up breaking a crane and dropping a container. So that was once we had got everything kind of set up in place. So there you see a little more of the final form, and we did things like open to sky showers, and that's how we kind of did the fabrication before everything else was fitted in. So as you can see, there's a lot of kind of panel work and a lot of board work on the inside, a lot of fabrication. So that shows that's the tree stump that you see on the picture in the right was the tree that we had to lose, unfortunately. But as you can see, the entire structure is above ground, and the ground under the site had a natural slope, and we didn't disturb it. So the rainwater, everything flows right under the house, and it doesn't disrupt anything. The whole house is kind of on stilts. The picture on the left is the entrance stairs, and we found civil workers from the area. So this was in a village it's not in Colombo, it's in the south of Sri Lanka, and we found local craftsmen and local landscapers and local people to do the civil work and the work around the container. And as you can see on the picture on the right, although it's an unconventional house, it was actually conceptualized around a very familiar concept that to us Asians, which was the courtyard. And the rooms open into the courtyard with big windows that kind of encourage cross ventilation. And the dining space is what you're looking out from, and it's completely like open with the option of kind of closing it up. So a few pictures of the completed project. So we were able to reuse 17.5 tons of steel of these containers, and we can recycle it again at the end of its lifespan, which I think is a great option. So you see the front elevation, that is the elevation that faces the garden. It's a 1 acre site, so there are beautiful trees that were already present on site. They're about probably 100 years old at least. And the entire front elevation is glass to face the view. So that's a few insights to the inside of the container. Like it really doesn't feel like a small metal box at all. And I think when you're confined to using smaller spaces or modular spaces, you make the maximum of it. And that's the elevated room upstairs and the open to sky showers. So the whole idea was to really blur the lines between the indoor and the outdoor spaces. So this is one of the smaller rooms, and because of all the views, I think on the green that you see on the right is into the courtyard, and onto the left is the entrance area and off the back. So they don't really feel too compact or too claustrophobic. And this is the central space, which is the living and the dining combined. And you can get little peeks into all the bedrooms on the side. So that's a living and dining space. And by raising the roof, I've also allowed for little bits of light to come in from between the container and the roof. So it kind of has a different volume and different feel. And I'll just end my presentation with a little video, which kind of sums up what the box house is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malisha, for sharing your design journey, your beautiful work, concern for the environment, careful use of resources and sustainability with us. With this, we will now open our session for conversation. We invite the audience to please share your questions for our presenters. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce our moderators for today's conversation. Uzair bin Mansoor is an architect and a recent graduate of architecture from Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture, Karachi, Pakistan. He is currently working as a junior architect. He's also a teacher of drawing fundamentals. Nidhi Nair, who's the second moderator for today's conversation, is my colleague and an intern at my landscape practice, VSLA. She's an architecture student from Rachana Sansad College of Architecture, Mumbai, India. Welcome, Uzair and Nidhi. With this, we open out the session for conversation.
Thank you, Anna ma'am, for the introduction. And also, we would like to thank all our speakers for sharing their journey and your inspiring work with us. It truly gave us an insight into your practice and your thought process, your entire design process. I would like to start by asking a question to both all three of the speakers. So we saw in your presentation that both your practices have dealt with modularity, although from different standpoints, one being that of a response to the COVID pandemic, and the other being such an intimate housing project. We'd like to know your outlook on the same, the fact that we'd like to know your outlook on modularity, since it is quite different from a traditional way of planning and designing. And by traditional, I mean the traditional way that we have been taught in the architectural academic. This question is to both of the practices.
Solachi, would you like to go first?
Sure. Can you hear us? Sorry, I just saw a message saying that you were not audible. Yeah, Ajay, would you like to take this question?
Yeah. As far as modular construction, using shipping container, so we have a basic architectural concept, like the code, very famous one, form follows function. So here our form is fixed. It's constrained with the existing simple cube. So we need to accommodate all of our function with the fixed boundary. So that's how, we have a limitation, and with the limitation, we need to fulfill our requirement in a manner it can easily function enough.
I think also for us the approach to modularity was it was a function of the ease of deployment which was required of us, and also the nature of use of this structure was temporary, so it had to be be able to move from one side to the other whenever it was necessary. So modularity helped us in achieving this. The other layer which we had to consider was that it had to be a portable structure. So which means that it was sort of almost completed on site, and it was simply deployed, completed in the factory and simply deployed on site. So when we were thinking about the materials, the junctions, we couldn't use very brittle materials. The junctions had to have a little bit of flexibility to take that movement. We also explored, container versus prefab structures, but then a container, it was advantages wherein everything could be done in the factory, including the electricals, services, and simply placed on site, which suited the client's requirements.
Architect Malisha, your views on the same?
Yeah, I think they're two very different projects, so you get two very different perspectives. I think it's very practical for the kind of project that Urban Workshop was doing. But in my case, that wasn't the case. It didn't need to be ported. But I think the biggest thing to learn was that when we are given restrictions, it makes you think. I was given an acre of a site. So if I had got carried away with the brief of 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, I would have ended up with a 5,000 square foot villa. But because I had to work within the confines of an already, it was within the confines of the box, I had to think a lot more creatively and a lot more. I surprised myself when I put in 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms into a 2,000 square foot footprint, including a 400 square foot living and dining space. So it became a very efficient use of space. And it was kind of to give a message that, look, a luxury villa, or it doesn't have to be sprawling space and waste a lot of space and resources in order to achieve that outcome, basically.
Thank you. Firstly, this is Zair Mansoor. Firstly, I would like to congratulate both of the practices for such brilliant work, presenting such brilliant presentations. My question would be would actually be for Urban Workshop, for architect Solachi and architect Ajay. That understanding from your presentations and what I've understood from the site photos is that you've worked with a vast array of rich geographies. And in these geographies, what kind of challenges, or have you faced any challenges in terms of material selection, in terms of the climate and the context that was provided in the different regions you have worked with?
Thanks, Uzair, for that question. Materials is something that we're very sort of passionate about, and we engage with it quite a lot. And for both of these projects, I think it was quite a natural choice, using bricks for the house in Chennai, where bricks was the dominant material and where stone was the dominant material in Kunnur. And everything else sort of then added to this story. The resources, the raw material for both these building materials were available in the region, and the skill set required to work with this material was also available, which made it easier. And with the bricks, I think we had quite an interesting journey, because we were, we sort of looked at many different types of bricks and proportions of bricks, and you had the thinner bricks which used to be used in Madras terrace roofs, and we ultimately ended up custom making the bricks to the proportion that we wanted, and that was also easily possible because they were being made in and around Chennai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Total materials for the climate condition as well.
Thank you so much, Architect Solachi and Architect Ajay. Also, the glimpses of product design that we can see on your Instagram page, our team loves it. It's a really nice set of works that you presented there. Also, my next question would be to Architect Malisha. This came about because your theme of a presentation was about adaptive reuse and renovation and repurposing. So with the fact that within the design communities, we see that there's a growing admiration for that. And we'd like to know more about the ground reality of such projects. Considering the sustainability aspect of your practice, could you speak more about the viability and the future of such a practice? that aims to do something like this with each project? And how do you see your future going about this?
I think it's sort of, I would say it's not really a straightforward path. And it's not, I think you have to have very special type of clients to be agreeable to take a leap of faith with you and kind of take something on. So not everyone would look at, a building like I had and be like, I'm putting down my money on that. It's quite, I would say, rare to find clients like that, and I've been fortunate enough so far to have that opportunity. Having said that, I also feel like if we are able to do more work like this and then kind of say, look, we can turn these kind of structures into a beautiful home, and I think when people start seeing them, they realize that the option is there. So I think that it's important to kind of go against the odds and kind of start doing it, start talking about it. But I don't think that I probably will be able to only do work like this also, because it's not really sustainable. There will also be new projects. There will be clients who want to kind of do things differently. But you can also always keep that at the base of everything you do. So even if you do design something new and you're doing like a new project, which is most often what we get commissioned for, you can still keep in mind the type of materials and how this building is going to end up once it's demolished. Or there's lots of things that you can think about and still make it. You just need to think about what you're doing. I think sometimes we get very carried away with the aesthetics and creating a beautiful building that not everyone takes the time to look into. Is this functional, and is the occupant going to be happy in this space? Is there enough light and ventilation and all those kind of things? So I think it's more a case of us being aware about it and trying to do more work along these lines. And I think the more people see, the more clients will also be convinced to try out different things. And yeah, I think that would be the way forward.
Thank you so much, Architect Malisha.
Okay, so there is something that I would like to ask, which would benefit both young architects and current students of all contexts, actually, in South Asia. As we all study similar precedents, similar case studies, we go through dealing with similar regional landscape. The question is extended to both the practices here, that what would be advice that you would want to give to young students and architects right now, currently in the entire South Asian context, and who were those architects, or who are those architects who have actually inspired you to pursue this line of practice that you're going ahead with right now, currently?
Solachi, you want to take that?
Sure. So that's, I mean, we were just talking about this, but I mean, there's just so many, I think, architects who inspire us, images. I think it really varies for each project. It could be in some projects, it could be a memory that we wanted to an experience that we wanted to create, as we did in the senior living, or it could be memory of a home, like in Samudra, where the client said, we want a sloping roof. And of course, there are many architects who we look at, quite a lot. There is Caesar, Sunthor, Bijoy Jain, and it helps us. We're trying to figure out what is the architecture that's relevant for today, and in this process we look at all these the works of all these different architects, and we also look at some artists, and I think there is a quote that I often refer to. It's by Sudarshan Shetty, an Indian artist, and I'm just going to read this out because I don't want to butcher it. He says, I operate from a position that has a view of what I don't know about something. Something could trigger this response in me whilst looking at something that I don't understand very well. So I try to employ disciplines in my work that I'm not familiar with, and this allows to bring forth my vulnerability by your own devices at times. It allows for something to emerge. So this really stayed with me. I think it just sort of makes us comfortable with that, unknown, and then things just evolve, just like how Malisha said as well. She was surprised that she could do so much with.
So more than inspiration, we just taken references, you can say. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Solachi said. I think we belong to a generation where we are not restricted by one school of thought or one line of thinking or one style of architecture. And I think we look at different places for inspiration. And while you can appreciate like the greats of that time, like Mies van der Rohe or Jeffrey Bawa, there are different things to learn from each of them, even if the styles are completely different. And I think it's architecture now is a lot more about collaboration. And like Solachi said, you can draw inspiration from artists, musicians. There can be so much of collaboration across different forms, different platforms. That is really hard to kind of look at one source or one idol like we used to, when we were when we were studying architecture, we used to idolize one architect. But in practice, I think you have different places, different people, different things to draw inspiration from. And having said that, sometimes it's also good to not look at precedents. Like I think Box House is one example where first time I did not do any precedent studies because it worked out well because I wasn't restricted by what had been achieved before in terms of container conversions. So I kind of thought for myself and just like, so that was also great. So sometimes not doing a precedent study and just thinking on a completely clean slate is also a great way of approaching a design.
Right. Something that I do understand from both of you right now is that what inspires both these practices is that not just architecture, but things around us that define us as like humans or people, that are just very human instincts which feed into our work, which feed into our design process, which feed into our growth. And there's this there's this common understanding that architects don't have time for life or living their life, and it's like just all-nighters and work. But the other human side of our lives, the other stuff that we do, is actually what's feeding into the design process. That's what I understand. And that's something which young students and architects need to take forward, which you've just highlighted right now. Thank you.
Yes, Jose, I completely agree with your standpoint. And yes, so urban workshop, the architect Solachi, the quote by Sudarshan Shetty was really beautiful. Like it spoke very openly about the inhibitions and the basically the vulnerability that comes from a design point of view when you're working on a project for the first time. And architect Malisha, that as a student, that completely makes sense, because even while getting into the academics, we are taught to look up to a certain set of people, and then while we get more into it, we realize that inspiration actually can be drawn absolutely from anywhere. I have been looking at the chat box, and as of now, we don't have any questions, but we will be taking questions on our Instagram pages too. So please keep yourself updated with that. And thank you to both of our speakers and our moderator, Uzair.
Thank you so much, Malisha, Solachi, Ajay, for sharing your extremely interesting work, process, and design concerns with us. We're truly very appreciative. Our thanks to our moderators, Uzair and Nidhi, for engaging the speakers in a really thought-provoking dialogue. To our audience for joining us, DU VSLA Clayworks team. Have a great weekend.